chambanamoms.com. And I'm really excited to have with me, and no, we are nowhere near each other, actually. We'll ask Emily where she is, but I'm really excited that we have Emily Hurth, who is a child life specialist at Carle, to talk to us a little bit about how we as parents can help manage or adapt or help our kids with everything that is going on in our world right now. So, Emily, thank you so much for being with us today on our chat. So tell us, where are we finding you today? I'm obviously at my house. Where are you?
I am the same. I'm at my house in the basement while my kids are napping.
Well, that's good. Well, thank you for taking some of that precious nap time and sharing it with us.
So. Of course, happy to help.
And how old are your kids?
So my kids are 9 months old and 3.5 years old.
Wow.
Yes.
So they're sort of maybe, well, the 3.5-year-old probably not so blissfully ignorant, but certainly the 9-month-old.
Right. I said to someone the other day, I said, I'm blessed in a way that I have, I only really have to focus a lot of the discussions on one of my children, so I give a lot of parents credit who have children in all different developmental stages that are seeking information.
Yeah. So Emily, tell us a little bit about what a child life specialist does and is.
Sure.
And maybe, obviously we're talking in very unique times, but
yes.
Maybe tell us what a typical day previous to this might have been like for you as well.
Right. So I should start by saying I've been in the field for 10 years, so I've done a little bit of a transition. I started working full-time at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago in the intensive care unit. I got my master's in social work and focused my clinical time on working, providing therapy with children and families who've experienced trauma. And that trauma included natural disasters, war, any type of trauma that they've experienced. I then moved on to coming down here once I got married and started working at Carle part-time. And then I also teach at the University of Illinois in Human Development and Family Studies. And I teach 2 courses, one on how to support children in the hospital and one on grief and loss. So I've kind of transitioned from clinical more to academia, but still kind of have my hand in clinical. So, it just depends where you work as far as specifics of what you do with child life. But the overarching goal of a child life specialist is to provide interventions to children that reduce anxiety, and help them cope with certain situations. Most of the time, we're seeing that in the healthcare environment, but we are seeing child life specialists now move out into disaster relief settings, into community health programs. So we're getting out there into a lot of different spaces.
Well, I think that's good to the betterment, because I always wondered why that was something that was so unique to a hospital environment. Yes. It seems like that's the kind of thing that we could use in lots of different environments. So,
yes.
So
and I should say many of the caregivers that are tuning in or seeing this probably have met some of us in the emergency department. If you've been there with one of your children. So a lot of what we do at Carle day to day is providing that support when children come in with really severe owies or injuries that they really need help, someone there to explain things to them in a developmentally appropriate way. So our background is really heavily, educationally, is heavily focused on child development. So making sure, doctors use big words. So we kind of come in as almost like interpreters or liaisons to help kind of bridge that gap, to help children understand what's happening to them, giving them really positive coping strategies.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like you are then the perfect person to be talking to us right now.
I hope so.
So do you have any recommendations for how parents should be talking with their children about the situation that we're in currently?
Sure. So I kind of break it down into steps, and I think this really helps parents to feel less overwhelmed by it. So the first one that I always start with is asking them what they know. Some parents want to start right in with these explanations, thinking that children have no idea what's happening. But we find often in the hospital and in life that children are very perceptive. They're listening in on conversations that maybe you think are private. They're watching the news. They're hearing bits and pieces of things. And so often misconceptions can happen. So, a child might think, we're under a terrorist attack, when really we're under a pandemic situation. So it's really important to start with, what do you know? Tell me, Emily, what do you know about what's happening in our world right now? And just kind of letting them say it. Some kids might say, I don't know. The next step, number 2, would be always providing honest information. There were studies done after 9/11 that showed children who weren't provided with any information or honest information actually had more anxiety than the kids who were provided with upfront, honest information about what was happening. Being a parent, I understand that it's really overwhelming to think about talking to your children about these things that are scary. We want to protect them, right? We want to keep them in this little innocent bubble. But what happens is then they hear the information elsewhere and they feel like maybe the caregivers who provide that safety net to them, that the trust is broken.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's hard to rebuild that trust. So it's really important. And I always tell families this: you have those conversations, but there's a developmentally appropriate way to do it. There's language that will help them understand without giving them too much or too little, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Any sort of words that you're focusing on, even with your own, 3-year-old?
Sure. Yeah. Lots of conversations about germs.
Mm-hmm.
There's some great, I know a lot of people are on social media right now talking about germs. And we can get into this question next about kind of how you explain it, but lots of conversations about germs, how germs are spread, but also really focusing on safety. So children can get fixated on the bad, the ugly, as can adults. So it's important to provide the reassurance of, yes, we have these germs spreading right now, but here's what we're doing to keep you safe and to keep you healthy, right? And so that's kind of where I've taken the discussions. I have some wonderful resources, actually one that's in many languages, a book that you can print that kids can color that explains what's happening. So if you guys have a way of sharing that with families, I'd be happy to give that link to you.
We can definitely link that into the comments, and that would be great.
Yes.
We have pre-recorded this, but we know that when people are watching it, that they are going to have some more questions. And so we'll check in on those questions. And we're curious from people, what are your kids having the most difficulty with during this quarantine? I know for my kid, it's not being able to see their friends. So, and it varies by the age.
Yes, 100%. And you know your kids the best. And that's what I always tell parents. And the other thing I say about these conversations is, really validate their feelings. I think so often we want to jump to like, it's okay, everything's fine, but really sitting with those emotions and saying, this is really sad, or it's normal to feel sad. Kids also feel conflicted because they feel sad and happy at the same time. I'm sad that our country is going through this, but I'm happy that I get time to not go to school or be home, to be home. And so I feel guilty for feeling happy. And so it's okay to say, no, all those feelings are normal. You can experience more than one feeling at a time. So that would be the next thing, validating, reassuring those feelings. I think another thing that parents kind of should really keep at the forefront of their mind is checking in with each individual child every day, every few days. I think all of us know that each of our children can be very different in how they cope, let alone different developmental stages. Some seek a lot of information, some don't. Some want to verbally process their information, some don't. So I think it's important, check-ins as a family are good, but also taking time to check in one-on-one with each child.
Mm-hmm. So how do you have any recommendations for explaining? I mean, I think at this point we're a week into this or so from this whole social distancing, but I still find that, and my kids are old enough to have, more comprehension of it, but I'm sure for little ones, it's like, okay, aren't we done with this already? And why aren't we? And so how do you keep explaining to them that, what, it's sad, but we can't play with we're home and but we can't play with our friends from school or whatever.
Right. Right. Well, and I think to start with, you make a great point because I think we forget that the younger age, some of those toddlers or toddlers moving into that early childhood age, they it's normal for them to repeatedly ask questions. So often we think that that means they're seeking further in-depth information, but not always. It's just kind of at the forefront of their mind again and like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
So as a parent of a young one, you will find yourself repeating over and over again, no, we're still social distancing. No, this is still going on. But my biggest advice is start with the discussion of germs. There's great books out there. The way I always explain it is kids, children always kind of want to think of concepts by the senses. That's kind of a great way to explain things to children, especially we think of this a lot in healthcare. So germs are not something we can smell, taste, hear, that kind of thing. But germs are something we can see under a microscope. But when we're normally looking out in the world, we don't see germs. They're very, 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 very tiny, and sometimes you have to give them an example. So you can say that they're living things. They're actually living organisms. Organisms is a big word, so I might keep that for the school age kiddos. And then I would start talking about how germs get into our body. So sometimes we get germs when one person coughs or breathes near us and they have germs that they're sick, then we might breathe that in because we share the air, right? Or when we touch things, there's germs on everything, right? And I think it's also important to tell parents we don't want to create children who are really afraid of germs. So it's okay to say sometimes there's good germs and sometimes they're bad germs, right? Not all germs make us sick.
Yes.
But we touch surfaces, and then oftentimes, what do? We touch our mouth, we touch our eyes, we touch our nose, and that's how germs spread. And so, right now, since we have this really big germ in the world, and we can, this book that I'm going to give you guys the link to is awesome about coronavirus. It's important that we stay away from each other right now so we don't spread that germ. That's how we're going to keep each other safe and healthy.
So you mentioned before about validating feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that some parents might be struggling themselves with their own feelings. So what is your recommendation on, do we tell our kids that we're scared? Do we pretend that we're not? What is your
Sure.
take on that? And
Yes. So I'm a firm believer in, obviously children look to caregivers to create that idea of how do I react to this situation, right? But we don't want kids to think that they can't be scared, they can't be sad, right? And so my recommendation always to parents is it's okay to cry. It's okay to show that you're scared. But when it becomes extreme, if you're crying majority of the day, or if you're really, and this is real for a lot of parents, if you're having anxiety attacks or panic attacks or something, that's, I think, when it's time to kind of step away and take a minute to yourself. But I always encourage parents to feel like they can show emotion in front of their kids. When you cry, you give validation to your child that it's okay to cry, right? It's okay to cry, and it's okay for us to all be sad and to take that time together. So I say yes, show emotion, but in moderation. I think we all know kind of when we're to the point where we maybe shouldn't be showing it to our children for fear that they might become, a little too scared or overwhelmed by our emotion.
Sure. Well, we've been talking with you for a little while, and you've provided some really great insights and examples of how we should behave. Is there anything else that you can think of before we sign off today?
Sure. I think one of the things that I really want to stress is that play is so important for children when they're trying to process big emotions and big events. Play is the universal language, right? For children, it's how children find mastery over experiences that are overwhelming. So really ensure that children are getting that time to play, observe their play, observe their cues, maybe what information they might be seeking. Children communicate a lot to us through play. So making sure that's a priority in your home right now would be huge. The other thing for older kids that I think we forget, and younger kids and adults too, is that we're all kind of grieving symbolic losses. the loss of being with our peers, the loss of being the same structured day of school or work, the loss of celebrations, graduation being canceled, not being able to be in sports activities. So I think it's also good to talk to children about grief, that we're grieving those losses in our lives. It might not be death, but these are symbolic losses that we're grieving. So it's important to talk to kids about that too. And I think overall, I think that, monitoring what's being put on the news or how often you're watching the news, monitor the discussions you're having with others on the phone. I think kids are really perceptive. But to parents, just to give themselves some grace, I think it's okay not to have everything in line and the perfect schedule right now. We're only 1 week into this social distancing. And from what I've seen, parents, caregivers in general have been rock stars. So and if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer anything specific from this discussion.
Yeah, well, that's great. Like we said, we did pre-record this.
Yeah.
But we will, when we play it, we'll monitor the comments and provide some resources as well.
Yes.
Some stuff that we put on the website that we have related to activities that they can do. Many of you might be aware that today we put out a Chalk Your Walk event and inspiring people to chalk their driveways or sidewalks or a sidewalk near them that possibly could make somebody's day a little brighter. And again, kind of to your point about, kids can express themselves through play, and chalk play is one of those things that's really normal. And it says spring, and that's something that they can all get out there and do. The good news about that is we did know that it was going to get a little chilly today. So we do plan to repeat it next Friday. So hopefully the weather will be better. We didn't want to do it tomorrow because I guess it might snow. Anyway,
Yes.
Who knows? But for those of you who are watching this, just know that on Fridays we will be highlighting chalking, and would love for people to send us their chalk drawings. But anyway, that's just one little way that we can help spread some positivity. And if you guys have ideas, please share them in the comments. And it's been wonderful to have Emily with us today. We're really grateful for your time and your insights. And I think it will help a lot of people out there in a time of extreme uncertainty that none of us have probably ever experienced in our lives. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
All right, everyone, we'll be back with more virtual interviews live from our houses later this week, and some other special virtual events. So stay tuned with Chambana Moms. Our goal is to keep the community connected, even in a time of great uncertainty. So thanks again to Emily Hurth from Carle, Child Life Specialist. We look forward to your comments and questions, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.